So indeed, yesterday I did a lot of praying, and I did fast, and I knew I had to fast today, so I wasn't exactly, happy about the fasting. But that's the sacrifice, God asks us for a sacrifice, and since he sacrificed his only son for me, I figured the least I could do is offer up the sacrifice and fight the desire to eat a box of the Girl Scout cookies that I brought home on Sunday. Talk about challenging. The Lord knows exactly how to get me. But the lesson has a lot to do with the fact that I find this one of the most fascinating stories in the Old Testament. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Pastor was preaching, and he brought up the story. And so that was like confirmation for me. I said, okay, then this is a story that I need to use in a Bible study. And since I have one prepared, I'm just going to pull it out and look at it again. And this story is in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, and it is the 22nd chapter of the book of Numbers. And I don't expect everyone to be familiar with the story, or you may know a little bit about the story, but it really is fundamental to the lesson that I have in my heart tonight. So I'm going to tell the whole story. And I hope that, that when you go home, that you will look at the 22nd chapter of Numbers and that you will study it, because it is just full of important messages for God's people. And it begins with, in the first verse, it says, "Then the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, 'Now this company will lick up everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field.' And Balak the son of Zippor was king of the Moabites at the time. And he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river, in the land the sons of his people. And he called to him, saying, 'Look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are settling next to me. Therefore, please come at once. Curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed.'" This is kind of a recurring theme in the Bible, that the people of Israel are blessed, and anyone who tries to curse them ends up cursed themselves. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand. Now, what's a diviner? The clearest I ever uncovered what a diviner is, it's obviously, it has to do with trying to read the future, to divine the future. It's kind of witchcrafty, it's, prophetic. It's a mixture of a lot of different things, most of them pagan. And Balak was known for his ability to divine. And the best lesson I ever had about this was I owned a piece of property in New Mexico, in a place called Cerrillos, New Mexico, once upon a time. And I wanted to build a house there because I had this, fantasy that I was going to live in New Mexico, not realizing that I come from like paradise where everything is green, and New Mexico, everything is brown, okay? All the time. It's no water at all, And I'm surrounded by ocean here, even in New York. I was close to an ocean. So I went out there, and I go up to this piece of property, which I had bought with some friends, back in the day when we all thought, well, we'll all, live on a commune, a kibbutz, and it'll be wonderful. And so we had bought this property. And I go out to this property, and there's no water on this property. No water. Forget about streams or wells, there's nothing. It's just desert with scrub. And so they tell me to go into the town and to find the water diviner. In Cerrillos is a town that still has a lot of Native Americans living there. As a matter of fact, Cerrillos is famous because you can hear and feel vibrations coming from the ground. and they say that it's a great Indian burial ground. I say it's just a place where God has his hand. And so I went into the town and I meet this old Native American. He looked like something, you know, that commercial with the tear falls out of the Indian's eye? He looked like that guy. I mean, it was a picture-perfect diviner. And he comes up to the property with like a switch in his hand. And now I'm a girl born and bred in New York City, right? Like, you know, what is he going to do with this switch? This is ridiculous, you know? And he begins to walk around the land, and he is holding this stick out in front of him. And about 20 minutes into his walking around, he stops and he says, "There's water here." And so I'm thinking, I'm not paying this guy unless I see water. You know, I don't, you know, I'm still full of disbelief. And so we had the well digger come up to the property the next day, and sure enough, the water was there, and it was nowhere else on this property. So divination is a gift. And some people have the gift of prophecy. Some people have the gift of divination. And Balak supposedly had this gift. He was a diviner, but he wasn't looking for water. He was actually able to either bless or curse people. So I don't know if I'm going to, you know, buy the whole thing, but I do know that it's in the book. So there's truth in this, and I have to believe it until proven otherwise. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. And he said to them, "Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me." So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, 'Look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come now, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to overpower them and drive them out.' And God said to Balaam, 'You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed.'" These are the Israelites that God has already said are going to be blessed no matter where they go. So Balaam arose in the morning, and he said to the princes, "Go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you." And the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, "Balaam refuses to come with us." And then Balak again sent princes, more numerous and more honorable than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, "The son of Zippor," Balak says, "please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will certainly honor you greatly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Therefore, please come, curse this people for me." Then Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God, to do less or more. Now therefore, please stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me." And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If the men come to call you, rise and go with them. But only the words which I speak to you, that you shall do." So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. And then God's anger was aroused. You know, we often talk about how God is jealous. God can be angered. Pastor often says, you don't want to stand in front of an angry God. So we know that God will have his way no matter what. And so now he's angry, and he sees that Balaam is riding this donkey with two servants walking with him. And as they're walking down the road, I'm just going to paraphrase because it's lengthy and you can read it yourself, but this is the meat of it. Verses 22 to verses 30 are, as they're going, the donkey refuses to move forward. Okay. Why? You know, donkeys are stubborn animals. If you've ever had a mule or a donkey, you know that once they get their minds set on stuff, they can get stuck. So the first thing that occurs to Balaam is that it's just the donkey being stubborn. He was riding on his donkey. His 2 servants were alongside of him, and the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in his way with his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned as if to get out of the way, and he went into the field. So now Balaam doesn't know what's going on, and he starts to beat the donkey, strikes the donkey, and turns her back onto the road. And then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path now between the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot. So he struck her again. So now he's beaten this donkey. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn, either to the right hand or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. Now Balaam's riding on this, and the donkey lays down. I don't know if you've ever been on a horse or a donkey or any other animal. I've been on a camel when it lays down, and trust me, it's not a pleasant experience. So Balaam's anger was aroused, and he struck the donkey again with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have abused me. I wish there was a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." So the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I became yours to this day? Was I ever disposed to do this to you?" And he said, "No." And then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way. And the purpose in this lesson is it reminds us, the story of the talking donkey reminds us that God can use anything or anybody that he wants to send you a message. Don't look down your nose at anybody or any creature thinking that you're superior to them, because should God open up their mouth, they'll speak truth to life, and you have just missed your blessing. And the Bible records a whole bunch of incidents like this when you think about it, right? The story of a talking donkey is in pretty good company, right? I mean, you have a burning bush in Exodus, and the voice of the Lord comes to Moses through that bush. You have a gentle breeze that speaks to people as God's voice. You have numerous examples in the Word, in particular in the Old Testament, where God will speak to people when they profess to be obedient to him, to test him. Look, he spoke to Noah, and he told Noah to do something absolutely outlandish. He's in the middle of a desert, and he tells him, build an ark. It's going to rain. Well, when is it going to rain? Don't worry about it. Just build the ark. Well, what do I build the ark out of? I don't even know what a boat is. But Noah was obedient. So Noah set about to build an ark. And we all know how that story ends. But in the story of Balaam, what we find is a man who said he was obedient to the Lord, but he grappled with a greedy heart. And why do I say that? Well, I'm going to unpack it for you. They offered him a lot of money to come and to curse the people of Israel. The king of Moabites offered him a great deal of money to do this. And even though God had already spoken to him and said, you are not to do this, you are not to curse these people, the money, the shiny thing, had an allure for him. You know, the Bible also tells us that you can't serve 2 masters. You have to make up your mind. Are you going to serve greed, or are you going to serve the Lord? Because it's not going to line up. You know, it's 2 very different paths. And God will send an angel. An angel of the Lord will appear to stop you from going down one path and to keep you encouraged to stay on the straight and narrow path. The Bible tells us that Balaam was the son of Beor, who lived in Pethor near the Euphrates River. he was highly regarded by the Moabites and the Midianites as now referred to a soothsayer, meaning that people would go to him and he would predict, or he would, tell their fortunes. I mean, I'm trying to make it contemporary. And he also had this prophetic ability that he could bless or he could curse. And so people were not just, in awe of him, they were a little bit afraid of him as well. And his brother was actually a king of Edom. And Balaam lived among all the idolaters. I mean, this was not about God with Balaam. He lived with people who had all kinds of graven images and all kinds of idols and gods that they worshiped, gods for the rain and gods for fertility and gods for you name it, they had a god for it. And he's living in the middle of this, and he's got this personal relationship with God. The true and living God speaks to him, and instead of being obedient to the voice of God, he allowed his greedy heart to take him off the path that he should have stayed on. And I wondered, for me, I can tell you, this is an issue that comes up, and it should come up in every sinner's life, and every sinner saved by grace's life. I work really hard at not coveting, not being envious, not being greedy. When I came home on Sunday with $80-something worth of Girl Scout cookies, I said, this is out and out greed, and I can dress it up any way I want and say, but I wanted to support my little girl and make sure that she could sell the most cookies. Well, guess what? Then I could have left the cookies here and we could have all eaten them, but that's not what I did. I took them all home and I made room for them in the pantry, so that they're piled up. Pastor will tell you, they're piled up like, to the top shelf, just Girl Scout. I haven't opened them yet because part of my disease is the accumulation of stuff. I don't even want it. I don't even have a desire to eat all these cookies, but just having them is something that I battle with. And that's what this lesson really is about. We all have something that's a gift, and then we all battle the other side, which wants to get in the way of our ability to use our gift. And when I indulge in the flesh, when I allow the flesh to overtake my spiritual being, there's a price attached to it. And I have learned over the years that it's never worth it. It's never worth it. You will never have enough of it to fill that hole that only God fills. You can't have enough money. You can't have enough love from men or women. You can't have enough love of cookies. You can't have enough alcohol. You can't have enough drugs. You can never fill that hole with anything except God. And so this fantasy or this illusion that we have that if I had, this, everything would be okay, is just that. It's the dark one. It's the evil one trying to make me believe that I don't need God to fill me up, that I can fill me up with something else. And if you're anything like me, I think Thomas always says it in the Sunday school lesson, I come of the variety of need to be hit on the head with a 2x4 like a few times before I figure things out. And this is a lesson that was, when it was first presented to me, when I first studied this story, I remember thinking, well, I would never go against what God told me to do. So this would never be relevant in my life. I try to do everything that God tells me to do. And then I began to see how easy it is for the devil to convince me that God really didn't say that. If he could convince Eve that God didn't really say that, what makes me think that he won't convince me? I mean, she had everything. She was in the Garden of Eden, She didn't need anything. She had a personal relationship with God. She had this awesome husband. And yet the one thing that God told her not to have, the only thing he said you can't have is that apple from the tree of knowledge in the center of this garden. So what did the devil do? He said, God didn't say that. That's not the truth. You can have anything. God made all this for you. And if you listen long enough to the devil, he'll convince you. He'll just make it almost impossible to remember what God said. And I know for me, I have to be vigilant. It's a constant recurring theme in my life, is God will plant that desire in me that I think can be fulfilled if I pick the right stock, if I get the right dress, if I marry the right man, if I go to the right place. And what I have learned is it never, ever works. As a matter of fact, what it does is it removes me from his covering. And then stuff starts to happen. Bad stuff starts to happen. Because once I've given in to that first temptation, once that door is open, it's amazing how, the minions, the devils, are all flooding through the gates. It may start with a couple of boxes of cookies, but by the end of this, if I don't get back to being obedient and to hearing God, it will end with my face in my plate because I'm drunk. That's how it ends for me. The door, once it's opened, always leads me to addiction, to vile and disgusting behaviors, and to tremendous loss. I know that. So I have to become conscious. I don't need the donkey to sit down or lie down underneath me anymore. The first time the donkey veers, I get on my knees and I say, whoa, what am I missing here? Which part of the lesson am I not learning that I would go forward, continue on this path, knowing very well where this path ends for me? I don't know where the path ends for any of you, but I know where the path ends for me. There's no question in my mind that every time my behavior begins to deteriorate, and it always starts the same way for me, it starts with a lie. It always starts with an untruth or a half-truth. And, I can tell you very clearly that the last time I fell out of favor with God began when I was walking through a public supermarket and I ate a Kit Kat bar and didn't pay for it. I balled up the wrapper in my hand and I put it in my pocket and I walked out of that store. And that was the beginning of the end. That was enough to open that door. And as soon as that door was opened, it was a cavalcade of deceit, dishonesty, hiding, behaviors that I had not evidenced in years, decades. I had not indulged in these behaviors. All of a sudden, they were natural again. All of a sudden, I was walking down that same path that I had been down before. And even though I knew where I was going and I knew how the story was going to end, I believed the lies of the devil, because the devil kept telling me, it will be different this time. It wasn't God who told you no. That's, that's your thinking, and it'll be all right this time. It's a small lie. It's a half-truth. People used to tell me, it's a white lie. A lie is a lie. Stealing is stealing. People will say to me, and, people have told me this many times, like, oh, Publix isn't going to miss a Kit Kat bar. That's not the point. The point is, I'm serving a God who has told me what he expects of me, and he told me how he will bless me if I honor his desire for me to live an upright life. So he saw me eat the Kit Kat bar, and the problem is, I knew it. I knew it. I knew I had lied. I knew that the door was open, and I was so fearful that I kept allowing the devil to lure me in further and further and further. And that's what happened to Balaam, was he literally knew that God had already given him very clear instructions. You are not to curse these people are blessed, and yet he's on his way, and he's thinking, if there's enough gold at the end of this road, God will forgive me, you know. And he is a forgiving God. He's full of grace and mercy. But if he's told you something, like he had told me over and over again, Joyce, you are not to steal, you are not to lie, you are not to cheat, you are not to drink, you are not to fornicate. He told me those things. I didn't just imagine them. I didn't just read them in the Word. God spoke those things to me. I remember, I know his voice, and I remember when he laid out the blueprint for my life. You know, on that day when deliverance came, not just salvation. You can be saved and not get delivered from all those things. But I remember the day that he delivered me from all that stuff, all that worldly stuff. And I could not believe, to this day, I can't believe that, you know, the devil can quote scripture too. You know, the devil knows what I like. The devil knows how to put what I like in my path. The devil knows how to dress up something I don't even think I like and make it look like something I like so that I go for it. I mean, this is serious business. When you're trying to walk with God and you are hemming and hawing or wondering, is this really God speaking? Or am I hearing something? You know, am I thinking too much? That's where the trouble begins. Because he's, again, I say, he's not the author of confusion. When I'm confused, then it's not God talking. You know, if I hear something and I'm like conflicted about it, that's not God. I know it's God when I'm quite certain it's God. You know, I may not like it. More often than not, I don't like it. You know, most of the time when God speaks to me, it's not to say, good job, Joyce. Most of the time when God speaks to me, it's to say, you're not paying attention. You need to be mindful of how you speak, of where you go, of how you treat other people. God rebukes me. He tries to transform me. You know, I didn't get, you know, transformed overnight. It's the renewing of my mind that's repeating things over and over again until the transformation takes place once and for all. But I'm not going to be realized. I'm not going to be sanctified while I'm still in the flesh. You know, I'm one of these people who believes that my sanctification is finalized when I'm standing in front of God. And he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Until then, I'm trying to work out my salvation. And every day presents a new challenge. You know, every day when I think like, I got this, you know, look at me, I'm serving God. Look at me, I'm making these video conference calls to the girls in jail. I'm doing everything that God told me to do, except I'm not. I'm not doing everything God told me to do. Because the first thing that he told me to do was to that he should be the priority in my life. He didn't say, go out and minister to the whole world. He said, have this relationship with me, and then I'll minister to the world through you. There's nothing that I can do on my own power. And every time I begin to think that I'm doing it on my own power, that's when I get in trouble. You know, and it happens all the time. The pendulum swung on me again this week. I was, you know, I get these emails from the chaplain's office in the Broward County Sheriff's Department. And so the email will say, you know, XYZ inmate has requested a video conference. Do you have time this week? You know, and so my instinct is immediately to say, absolutely, I'm on, tomorrow, whatever, without really processing anything, you know, because I got to serve God 24/7. And then what ends up happening, I go, yes, okay. And then I look at my calendar, and the 2 times that I've been offered, I'm either at work or I'm at church. And so I'm not going to be able to do these 2 times. And had I waited and checked the schedule, which is probably a more propitious thing to do, I could have said, can we make it Wednesday at 3:45? Which I ended up having to do anyway. But it's this thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to save the world. That gets me in trouble every time. God is using me. He'll use me however he wants to do. If he can make a donkey speak I assure you, he can deliver a message to an inmate with or without me. Because if it's not me, then the cockroach will speak to her. You know, I believe that, you know, and I have experience with that. It wasn't an individual who spoke to me in my wilderness jail experience. No, 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 no. I rejected all the individuals that were trying to speak to me. When the women would come in to minister, I would stand in the doorway of the cell block and just shout obscenities because I wasn't having any part of this. You know, I belonged 110% to the evil one. You know, so I didn't hear the message from somebody. You know how I heard the message? I heard the message in the wee small hours of the night when I heard this wailing. And I didn't know where it was coming from. It wasn't a bunkie. It wasn't anybody within this, you know, the vicinity that I could identify. It wasn't a human being. And I remember lying there and seeing literally some kind of vermin, you know, a mouse, a rat. I don't really remember or care to remember what the vermin was. And the vermin said, "Be still and know that I am God." And I said, wait a minute. I didn't listen to the preachers and the women in the prison ministry. Am I supposed to listen to the mouse? And then I remembered that God can use whoever he wants, whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And I need to be paying attention. If a donkey could speak, then a mouse could speak. So when I first studied this lesson, it became crystal clear to me that God had used that vermin in my case. So why not a donkey? You know, why wouldn't this be true? If I'm going to do the wrong thing, God will stop me one way or the other. If he has to use my husband, if he has to use one of you, if he has to use my cat, he will find a way to stop me. And the difference today is that I know it's him. You know, I don't question and say like, well, a donkey can't talk, a mouse can't talk, a breeze can't talk, you know, the Bible can't talk. No, all of those things can speak to me, and all of them do. When I open up the Word, when I open up this book, there is a voice that accompanies the page. I don't just look at it and say, oh, isn't that interesting? You know, let me go through thy land. We will not turn into the fields. No, 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 no. I hear his voice. And sometimes I can't read very much because I get so overwhelmed with emotion that he cares enough to talk to me that I get frozen. And I'll allow myself to weep because his awesomeness, his magnificence, his ability to reach through a black and white page and tell me what I need to hear is so blessed. I'm so blessed that I can hear him. And I know that. And that's what I want for people. You know, when people ask me all the time and they say, how do you know God's voice? How do you not know God's voice? You know, I know God's voice because if he said it, that settles it. It happens. How do I know it's not God's voice? Because it doesn't happen. Because it's not of God. Because I can't find it anywhere in this book. If it's not in this book, it's not from God. Okay? He is not going to make me confounded or confused. He's going to give me clear and simple directions. And that's what I need. I can only speak for myself. I need clear direction. And that's what I seek when I pray. I'm not asking God to give me some great revelation. I don't want to become, you know, Paula White or Joyce Myers, or, you know, that's not my desire in getting closer and closer to God. My desire is that I can hear him at all times. That no matter what I'm going through, there's never that struggle, that doubt, that questioning. There's that sureness that he's speaking right now. When you see the words, and people have them on their walls, and people have them on their T-shirts, and, you know, listen, I've got all the slogans and all the stuff just like everybody else. But when it says, be still and know that I am God, that's exactly what God is telling us, to be still. All this busyness, me rushing to get a video conference call, or me rushing to prepare yet another lesson when I already have one prepared, or me thinking that somehow Joyce is responsible for everybody in the world, getting saved and getting delivered and getting I am not even, I don't even approach anything like sainthood, but God can use me. He can use anybody. He can use a donkey. Scripture tells us the Lord opened the donkey's mouth. It didn't say that the soothsayer Balaam had a talking donkey. The Lord opened the donkey's mouth and said, what did the donkey say, mind you? What have I done to you? Why have you beat me? And I thought about that because that's how God speaks, not in riddles, not like, hey, you know what I saw on the road ahead and maybe I ought to rethink this journey. That's not what the donkey said. The donkey said, what have I done to deserve this? And that's what God says to me a lot of the time. What have I done that you think it's okay to go 2 or 3 days without giving me any time, without paying any attention to me at all, or thinking that your morning prayer is enough, and that you don't have to seek me throughout the rest of the day? That's what I hear all the time. And my response used to be just like Balaam's, who said, hey, if I had a sword, I'd kill you right now. Because anger is one of my issues. It's something that I do grapple with. And instead, today, the way I handle when God speaks to me in terms that really chasten me or rebuke me, I say, get rid of this pride. Lord, take this pride away. Take this wickedness out of me, Lord. Take me and turn me into yours, which is what the donkey says to Balaam. Am I not yours? That's what I have to say to God. That's always been the bottom line in my relationship with God, is what he is asking of me, and I believe what he's asking of you, is to say, am I not your child? Have I not always done what you've asked me to do? Therefore, shouldn't I be in the habit of listening to you? I tell the story often. I have 2 kids, biological kids. I have multiple kids. But I have these 2 biological kids, and when they went off to college within 2 or 3 years of each other, there was a marked difference in the way they acted in their relationship with me. If the phone rang and I looked down and I saw Jenya's name, I would decide whether or not I was going to take it, because the odds are she was going to ask me for money or a plane ticket. That's when she would call me. But if I looked down and I saw Derek's name on the phone, I always answered on the first ring. Why? Because whenever he called, it was to tell me that he missed me, that he loved me, that he didn't need anything, that he appreciates everything that I've done for him. God's the same way. If he's not answering your call, you're probably like my daughter. You only call him when you need something. You don't have a relationship with him. You want to be like my son. You want to have this relationship with him so that whenever his pager goes off and he looks down and says, oh, Joyce needs me, let me respond. That's what, Balaam was missing, was that here's God who talks to him and tells him, don't curse those people. They're blessed. And he's still thinking in his head, well, I could probably get away with cursing them and, get some, and God will forgive me. God and I got it like that, God and I don't got it like that. When I'm disobedient, stuff starts to happen real quick. It doesn't take long, and I'm responsible for that. God does not punish me unless I deserve it. He doesn't rebuke me for fun. He loves me. He sent his son to die for me. So when I get rebuked, I got to really consider why. And I got to be willing to change. Because when I am willing to change, then God opens up your eyes. See, Balaam never saw those angels on the road, the angel on the road. He didn't see it the first time. He didn't see it the second time. He didn't see it the third time. But when the donkey says, "What have I done to you?" and he responds with viciousness, God opens up his eyes. And God says, "Look at what you're doing. Now you know what you're doing. Now what's your excuse? What are you going to do?" Well, I've discovered the only thing I can do is I need to repent. I need to fall down on my knees, on my face more than likely, and ask God, am I not yours? Have I not tried to do everything that you asked me to do? But there's evil in me, Lord. I need you to clean me up. I need you to take this away. I need you to move now. And when you say that, he moves. And I think that's why most of us are afraid to say it. Because you know that if you ask God to deliver you, I'll tell you the truth. When I asked God to deliver me from drugs and alcohol, he did. You know, so for a long time I didn't want to ask. Because I really wasn't willing. You know, I would kind of ask when I was in trouble. I'd say like, "Oh Lord, you know, I promise I will never do this again, Lord. You know, if you just get me out of this pickle this time, Lord, I'll make it better next time." That's not what I'm talking about. It was the day when I finally said, "Take this away from me. You can have it all," that he was able to do that. And trust me, he'll keep doing it, but you got to keep doing what he's asked you to do. You don't get to rest on your laurels. You don't get to, you know, carry around a keychain full of tags and think that's your security blanket. The only security blanket you have is him. And if you're not in fellowship, not in relationship with him, then guess what? He'll send a donkey to give you a message. I thought about that, you know, over the weekend, and I said, you know, he has often sent a ASS to me to give me a message. You know, I've gotten some pretty illuminating, enlightening messages from the most unlikely of people who I had nothing but contempt for, people who I looked down at, and God would show up in them and show me what I needed to do. So to me, the donkey is a metaphor in a way of all of the donkeys and mules and I guess I can say the word asses that have come through our lives. Be careful how you treat people. Be careful how you treat animals. Be careful how you treat God's creation, the earth. Be careful because it's his, and he only lets us use this stuff. And he can take it all away from us in a heartbeat. Everything that I've ever accumulated, and believe me, you know, I have a modicum of appreciation for things that I worked hard for and things that I was able to accomplish. I understand that, but for the grace of God, none of it. None of it. I couldn't have gotten any of it. You know, I didn't deserve any of it. I still don't deserve any of it. It's straight up grace and mercy that I've been able to do the things that I've done and achieve the things that I've done, and for him to continue to bless me the way he blesses me. But I know that the Word of God is true, and that means this is a historical record. This story, because this will happen to you as you become evangelists, and that's the purpose of the Solid Rock Ministry, is to make ministers and send them out into the whole world. And you don't have to have a collar, and you don't have to have a title, and you don't have to have your own church, but you have to understand that people are going to come at you, and they're going to say, well, you expect me to read, you know, to believe stories about donkeys talking? You expect me to believe that a woman, you know, was impregnated by the Holy Spirit? You expect me to believe those things? You better be able to answer those questions. You better have enough scripture in you to say, oh yeah, the Word of God is true. Here, let me show you the account of Balaam and the Moabites. And let me show you how it is in history. I remember 2 or 3 books ago when Brother Thomas was teaching about how you talk about creation with people who tell you, oh, you know, it came out of the slime and all this other jazz. And, you know, and they tell you, oh, don't you believe in science? Sure, I believe in science, but the theory of evolution is a theory. The Bible is actually a book full of historical facts, and they're borne out by archaeology. When people say to me, oh, well, how do you know that the Jews belong in Israel? Well, I'll tell you, I can give you 7 reasons that I know. First and foremost, it's in this book. Second, the archaeology tells me it's there. I've been to Israel. I've seen the digs. There were Jewish people living in that land before anybody else was there. You know, it's borne out by the fact that, let me say this, Israel is this tiny little country surrounded by enemies, literally surrounded. When you fly into Israel, for miles and miles and miles, as the plane begins to come in for a descent, you see sand and more sand and sand and more sand and sand and sand. And then all of a sudden, this thing blooms. There's like orchids and vineyards and all of this out in the middle of this desert, right? You've arrived. You know, the plane will be landing at Ben Gurion Airport, okay? And you know, I don't know if any of you have ever heard the story, but when my father was in the Army, and he was in the airmen of the Army, because there was no Air Force during World War II. The Air Force began after World War II. So my father worked, he was a mechanic on planes in Pearl Harbor. And so he worked alongside of many, many people. He was a New York kid, grew up on the Lower East Side, you know, his father was a cantor. You know, he was a real Jewish kid. And he goes into the Army, and there's like no Jews. You know, he's with like, you know, this guy from Kentucky, and that guy from Tennessee, and this guy from Georgia, and that guy from, you know, the Midwest. And like they'd never seen a Jew. They were looking for his horns and stuff. They had no idea what they're. And there was one other Jew in his unit. You know, this guy, Harold Kalba, was the only other Jew in his unit, and they worked on airplanes together. And when the war ended, and by the way, both Harold and my father, talk about how God has his hands on certain people, both Harold and my father were in San Francisco when they bombed Pearl Harbor. They were on leave, and they went back to bring those ships up and to repair the planes that had gone down with the aircraft carriers. And then they went to the Pacific, and they both served in the Pacific. And when the war ended, everybody went home. Harold was from Charlotte, the South somewhere, but it was the only Jewish community like I'd ever heard of in the South. And he was from there, and he went back to that place, Savannah maybe, whatever it was. He went back somewhere like that. Anyway, he went back, and my father went back to New York. And 20 years later, my father got a phone call from Harold. And Harold said, I'm coming to New York. I'm going to be buying some airplanes, and I need you to drive me to go see them. So my father said, I don't have a car. He said, I'll rent a car, and you just take me to where these airplanes are. And so Harold comes in, flies in. He's now living in Israel. Flies in, and him and my father go on this journey. I'll never forget. They drive up to, I don't know, somewhere in upstate New York, and they come to this place where there are all these old planes. I'm talking planes that have been set out to pasture. They're not supposed to fly anymore. These planes are like, you know, held together with spit and glue, okay? And Harold goes, I want them all. And my father goes, Harold, these planes can't fly. What do you need them for? And he says, we're starting an Air Force in Israel, and I'm going to be in charge. I need planes. So my father says, but these planes won't work. And he said, you don't know who my co-pilot is. And that's the truth. He took back 17 airplanes to Israel and began the IDF Air Force with those 17 rickety planes. But you know what? God had blessed those people, and God saw to it that those planes held together. And then little by slowly, that the Israeli Defense Force grew and grew and grew until right now it is possibly the single most prepared army, navy, everything in the world commensurate to its size. I mean, obviously you've got bigger armies in China and here in the United States, but for its size, it is everybody serves, boys and girls. 18, you're in the military. You've got to serve. You walk around in Tel Aviv, you walk around anywhere in Israel, and you see teenagers with M16s, patrolling the streets because they're in danger all the time. And I tell you that because when God has his hand on something, all bets are off. I don't care what it looks like. That rickety plane ain't going down. When the 7-Day War happened, you have to understand, here's Israel with the great general Moshe Dayan, right? And they're surrounded by enemies on every side, okay? And they're all coming at them at the same time. How do you win that war? Because if God be with you, who can be against you? God won that war. He didn't allow them to be defeated. So the voice of God can come from wherever it comes. If it comes to you through a donkey or through someone like me, who's just a little bit more than a donkey, not that much, but just a shade more, God sees your heart. So heed his call, would you? Just don't allow the wickedness in you to keep you from hearing his voice and from following his will. Because it says in Deuteronomy that God holds his blessing on the Israelites firm. And it doesn't matter what man desires. He won't let it go. So that's the God. He's the God of love, the love that's fierce, a love that's almighty, a love that's all-knowing, a love that's good, a love that you can't find it anywhere else. So we got to be more like the gentle donkey than we do have to be like Balaam. And I appreciate your time. Yeah.